Your Excellency, President Mattarella, Mrs. Laura Mattarella, Your Majesties, Excellencies, students, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor to welcome you here to the city of Lund and to Lund University. And we are proud that you have selected to give your lecture here for our students. And warmly welcome, Mr. President, to give your speech.
I wish to thank the Chancellor for having given me the opportunity to deliver this speech in this historic university, one of the most ancient universities of Northern Europe and among the most prestigious universities in Europe and all over the world. I wish to express my deepest gratitude to their Majesties for being present here today. I believe it testifies in a wonderful way to the excellent agreement which fuels the bilateral relations between Sweden and Italy, and which is the underlying theme of the state visit which is being concluded today. I wish to express my gratitude to their Majesties once more for their welcome and for the kindness shown to myself, my daughter, and to the entire Italian delegation. The ancient and prestigious institution which is hosting us today has been one of the pillars of academia in Sweden for over 350 years. And I wish to extend my very warm greetings to the entire academic staff and to the researchers of this institution, its entire staff, and especially to all the students which come from over 170 countries, including Italy. This is a university which is authentically open to cultural diversity, and it offers the best possible context, the one that each university wishes to promote, as a way of developing knowledge and as a way of conveying knowledge to future generations. And I believe that the relationship between memory and future generations is one of the themes which has marked the year which is now ending. A year during which Europe celebrated the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. A war which left indelible traces, especially on our continent. Traces such as grief, mourning, and deep divisions among our peoples. And our inability to learn lessons from that immense tragedy, with over 10 million victims in Europe alone, led us to the Second World War in 20 years' time. After the two wars, our continent, which had based its development on its trust of knowledge and on the dissemination of knowledge worldwide, on scientific and technological progress, and on our ambition to have a culture which could be capable of modeling society, that very continent, Europe, seemed to be on a trajectory of unavoidable decline, intensified by political fractures and huge economic crises which affected its territories very deeply. A condition which Even countries such as Sweden, which had not taken part in the two world conflicts, experience as a major weight on their future. I think one word, one term which could describe the prevailing feeling in Europe in the mid-40s, and that word would be bewilderment. It was the bewilderment of defeat by those who had lost the war, but it was also the feeling of ruin, of collapse that the winners of the war faced. A situation in which nothing would lead us to believe that we could ever go back to the conditions we had prior to the war. And there was a belief that the residual resources which had survived the war would have been consumed quickly, and that there would have been serious difficulties for European peoples. This was the scenario in which our continent's integration began, a process that Sweden was an active participant in and a careful observer of. There were disparate attempts, which were sometimes contradictory and which sometimes ended in failure. A lot was done, from the Marshall Plan to the cooperation between Scandinavian countries, to the proposal of a European defense community, all the way to the journey which then led to the development of the experience of the European community. A process which has now led to the European Union. And it was a process due to the farsightedness of our founding fathers, who were able to extend their gaze further than others. It was a process which began, first of all, on an understanding and on a will. That idea being that there should never be war again, that there should never be clashes, that we should promote unity to grow together, beginning on resources such as coal and steel, which had been the object of so many conflicts in the past. Nonetheless, ensuring a horizon of peace and of increasing and disseminated prosperity to the future generations, a context which has marked European history ever since the end of World War II, also requires our awareness that sometimes in history we can end up taking steps back. It means we should never forget the lessons learned from the monstrosities of a part of our past. And in fact, we have to remember the extraordinary and very brave founding moments. We have to remember the fact that we were capable of allowing our continent to overcome the deep divisions which had wounded it, allowing Europe to once again be a producer of ideas, of culture, of rights and progress in all contexts. We must remember that all of this was possible due to our awareness of belonging to a single cultural heritage, and by choosing to design the future of our peoples together. We chose to be together in the future. And this means that each of our generations has to embrace our past. We have to allow it to become a part of our collective memory. We have to develop the capability to avoid repeating the conflicts which we have experienced over the centuries. And the contribution of the Kingdom of Sweden, which next year will celebrate its 25th anniversary of its entrance in the Union, was remarkable. Universities, which began and developed in Europe, have always played an essential role in this context. The unity of European culture is based on values such as freedom of research and on the openness of its intellectual milieu. And that is very much a part of universities. It was a founding element of universities ever since medieval studies and the clerici vagantes. A university is a place in which ideas and studying turns into growth and progress. And universities, by definition, foster on knowledge. They protect history, both both of which are the essential steps needed to make further steps. Our memory is like the ship's bottom in a vessel. It is like the foundations of a building. You don't see them, but without them, a ship would sink, or a building subject to stress would collapse. Your Majesty, Europe is going through a complex phase, a situation in which stress and strains that our common building have to absorb are very intense. None of our founding fathers ever denied that the integration process could be difficult. And in fact, one of our founders, Jean Monnet, theorized that progress in building Europe was also linked to its ability to overcome crises. Now, if that is the spirit we have, then we also have to look into ourselves as to the way in which the European peoples wish to move forward. The Lisbon Treaty, in its preamble, clearly states the goal, which is that of creating a stronger union amongst the people of Europe, the decisions of which have to be taken as close as possible to citizens according to the principle of subsidiarity, which means that we are not a mere customs union. We are not a sort of business committee. Were we only to consider the economic and trade approach, we are a lot more than that. We are a single market, an economic space, the responsibility of which is that of a global power. And it has an impact on a number of aspects which are closely linked to the free movement of people. From sustainable growth to our social model, to the international redistribution of resources, to the guarantee that these freedoms can be exercised in a framework of security and stability. The economic and financial crisis marked this past decade with major consequences in our populations. It is now accompanied by a flow of migration towards Europe, which is remarkable. Whereas within the Union, the United Kingdom decided to abandon our integration process. There are different sensibilities which have grown amongst the members of the Union. And this has brought about feelings of distance between our European citizens and the EU's institutions. A distance for which the European design, its meaning, its institutions, its policies, its rules and procedures are sometimes perceived as part of Europe's citizens as distant, or as a source of opportunity which can be tapped into based on specific conveniences without any soul or without any reason. This is a short-sighted approach which does not carefully consider not so much what we have to face in times of crisis, but rather it doesn't consider the many things we have achieved. And our achievements are often taken for granted, once and for all. Together with memory, therefore, we have to work on a daily basis so that a Europe of citizens can be a formula to be truly implemented. Just a few kilometers away from here, in Gothenburg, exactly 1 year ago, the Union made an extremely important step forward. And on that occasion, the European leaders signed a document which defines specific guidelines for a renewed attention on the European Union's part and on the member states' part on the social dimension, on education and training, on culture, and on policies for our youth. The advances made over the years towards a single market, with a choice made by some countries to join the monetary union straight away, was something essential. But it must be accompanied by other results which are just as important. and which can continue to fuel the way in which European citizens identify in our common institutions. It is the role of the Union as a creator, custodian, and guarantor of our rights to protect our citizens in the same way, always and everywhere. It is a role which is mentioned by the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. And in fact, the first of the 20 principles mentioned in the Gothenburg document is dedicated to education, to training, and to lifelong learning. The goal of which is to allow each and every one of us to continue to be an active part of society throughout their professional life. Access to the labor market, gender equality, equal pay for equal jobs, social dialogue, long-term assistance. All of these are the cornerstones, the foundations of our living together, something that together we have to further develop to the benefit of all of our citizens. Gothenburg marked an essential moment in the life of the Union. It defined the characters of a true social pillar. It was a moment during which Europe focused once again on the promotion and dissemination of rights, which is a characteristic of the most important moments in its history. It is a path towards European citizenship, which has to be taken into with courage and bravery. The Charter of Gothenburg and its tangible efforts and its implementation can contribute to overcome the disparities within our continent. And it focuses on a concept, and it questions the concept of a Europe with different speeds applied to the principles of the Union. It consolidates the perspective of a united Europe, an efficient Europe, one close to its citizens, one ready to defend our rights, including social rights. A Europe which wishes to offer to its children all equal opportunities, regardless of where they are born. It is a Europe in which the Erasmus generation and the Euro generation, which is so well represented in this university, can guide their own destinies increasingly. And by doing so, they can strengthen the true meaning of the European project for the future generations. It is our common responsibility to make sure that the implementation of the principles drafted in Gothenburg continue to be part of the agenda that will be a fundamental element of our debate in our future institutional cycle, given the upcoming elections for the European Parliament. Dear students, I mentioned the sense of responsibility that we all have as part of a great project, a project which for over 60 years has been guiding our collective actions. It is a responsibility which we share with the younger generations, which are the future of Europe. And my plea today, my hope, is that you may continue to travel, to study, to get to know the cultures of places you will travel to learn their languages, to learn their lifestyles, their traditions and identities, enriching them, and together with your colleagues so that you can share dreams and aspirations. The culture which has united us and which continues to unite us makes us proud of being Europeans. We are the sons and daughters of Dante, Shakespeare, Descartes, Anderson, Cervantes, Goethe, Joyce, Strindberg, and Bergman. And at the same time, we are sons and daughters of an era in which the notion of space and time have changed radically. And thanks to the institutions such as the one hosting us today, I am convinced of the fact that we will be capable of conveying this immense and precious humanity of values to the generations which will follow. And at the same time, we will be capable of offering it to the world as an experience of peaceful coexistence that we can always turn to. Thank you, and all the best.
Dear all, and dear President Mattarella, we're honored to have you here. And on behalf of all the students, I would wholeheartedly like to thank you for this very important lecture. I'm convinced that we have to be reminded of our history. We need to be reminded of the role the universities can play when it comes to shaping a future tomorrow and the tomorrow of Europe, and also the role that we as individuals and as students can play. And I'm also convinced that the only way is forward, as you mentioned, and together. And I'm also convinced that we all got a bit wiser after hearing your very inspiring lecture. Therefore, thank you, tack så mycket, and grazie mille.